This year, TYT's been making a lot of moves. Now you can too. Now, how are you going to do that? You want to launch a new business? That sounds fun. You're going to change careers? Geez, and Lord mercy. You're going to need a website for all that. Lucky for you, Squarespace also making moves. You're going to go to squarespace.com/TYT. You're going to get 10% off your first purchase, and you're going to get to build anything you want on that website with a unique domain. What are you, crazy? Go do it now. Go.
Hey TYT, I'm Nomiki Konst. We're here in Milwaukee. We've been covering the movement work on the ground in Wisconsin for 2018 because across the country there's quite a bit of organizing and resistance work happening. You know, so many people have stepped up and said that they want to run for office. They want to organize block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood. But in Wisconsin, many are saying it was the petri dish. It was the test case for Donald Trump. Of course, we're referring to the anti-union tactics by the far right, Scott Walker's recall and the protests around Act 10 in 2011. Well, there are a bunch of people who've risen up in this state to run on a pro-worker, pro-union style of campaigning, I guess. It's not just their platforms, but who they are. And there's also great organizing work around intersectionality and discussing some of the key issues that face Wisconsin. In Milwaukee here, where we are, it is the most segregated city in the country. So we met Angela Lang, who works for an organization called BLOC, and just out and realized you're doing incredible work. We're doing what Wisconsinites seem to do a lot, and people on campaigns do a lot, let's just be real. We're having a nice drink. So cheers.
Yes, cheers.
This is our last night in Wisconsin. Thank you for spending it with us.
Thanks for coming.
At our hotel.
Yeah.
Gotta take a drink. So tell me about BLOC. What is this organization?
Yeah, so Black Leaders Organizing for Communities. It's an opportunity to really uplift the voice of Black Milwaukee. As you mentioned, it's like the most segregated in Milwaukee. And there's kind of been a vacuum, and no one has really been talking to Black voters on the north side of Milwaukee, and we just felt like we need to make sure that our voices were being heard. Our issues were being reflected in the narratives of anyone that's running for office. We very much are, you want our vote, come get our vote. If you want to win a statewide election, that line comes through Milwaukee, which is a majority minority city, and specifically that line now runs through BLOC. And so what does it mean to have our organizers talk to people every day? We've knocked on over 5,000 doors in about 6 weeks. How are we able to take what we're hearing from the average Black person on the north side of Milwaukee and make sure that those issues are being reflected in anyone that's running for a statewide election and asking for a vote?
Are these communities that have completely been ignored by electeds, or are they communities that electeds go to, Democrats go to in the final moments because they rely on them? Historically,
it's been more of a transactional relationship, and we're trying to be more transformative, right? I think a lot of people have knocked on doors during GOTV, or if we're lucky in September or October, and say, let's start to do work in Black Milwaukee, but really acknowledging that it's very superficial and it's more of seeing Black folks as just votes and commodities, and what does it look like to invest in people as holistic beings and issues, and people that deal with real things on a day-to-day basis, and making sure that we're holding people accountable and doing a year-round civic engagement plan, whether it's an election or not. We're making sure that we're holding people accountable and asserting our issues.
What I find it so interesting that Milwaukee, with such strong labor history, I mean, this state has such strong labor history, and of course, the majority of people of color, or the majority of union membership, are people of color. We learned that with the Fight for 15, and economics affect women of color the most.
Yes.
So I think what I find so fascinating is how a city like Milwaukee can be so segregated.
Yeah.
And it didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen in 2011. This started a long time ago. Tell us a little bit about the history.
Yeah, and so I think it's taken a long time to really figure out how we've gotten here. And even if you just drive through, there's certain neighborhoods that people just don't go to, right? It's just oh, that's deemed as low income or predominantly Black or predominantly Latinx, and so people just don't go there. And if you drive through the city of Milwaukee, and I tell people all the time, Milwaukee breaks my heart and inspires me every day, because you just drive through from one side of town to the other, and you see that there's literal bridges that are dividing people, right? And it's literally like a tale of two cities. And people don't really interact with each other on a regular basis. We've had a lot of movements of people of color and young people in the 60s or 70s, and I feel like we're seeing a resurgence of that. What happened in Sherman Park not too long ago kind of was the catalyst that kind of really re-sparked a conversation.
What happened in Sherman Park?
So in Sherman Park, there was a man that was shot and killed by the police. He was running away, and there was all this controversy. You know, we have several police shootings and police, I'll call them murders, in Milwaukee, and there's a community that, you know, whether it's black or brown, that is over-policed all the time. And so Sherman Park was the straw that broke the camel's back. A man was shot and killed, and then the verdict came back that there would be no indictment. And so, as we've seen all across the country, there's a lot of hurt and a lot of pain and a lot of trauma that happens when we get that news. And so there was several nights, there was a couple nights of unrest. You know, there's gas stations that were lit on fire because people needed to be heard, right? And if you're not being heard in, quote, the traditional ways, you're gonna do whatever you can to make your voice heard. And so Sherman Park has been kind of like this ground zero for what it means to really invest in the black community, in a beautiful neighborhood with beautiful houses, but has this tragedy that happened, right? And so how are people really organizing around that? And if people aren't being heard economically, racially, like, you know, black women aren't being heard, what are we doing to actually make sure that our issues are being centered? And so a lot of work has been done in Sherman Park, but acknowledging that that's just like a microcosm of just what's going on in Milwaukee. And so Milwaukee has never elected a black mayor, and we're a majority minority city. We had an appointed black mayor to fill out like the interim term one time, but we've never elected a black mayor. And so what does that look like to really feel that you are being represented at all levels and not feel that you are being hopeless, right? And that people are knocking on your door in a very transactional way, asking you for something, but being proactive and saying, what does it look like to thrive? What does it mean to have the freedom to thrive in your community and not just survive on a day-to-day basis? And BLOC is really trying to position ourselves to be that resource and really uplift. We're not trying to be less poor, right? We're not trying to, you know, fight for scraps. We're actually trying to thrive just like anybody else is.
I learned today, I was shocked by this, that Wisconsin has the highest incarceration rate for black men. How is this happening? Why here? I mean, this is being drowned out in the media.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would assume it's in other parts. I mean, places where, like California there's a large prison, you know, private prison population. It's, the industry's huge, but, you know, people are fighting against it. You hear it.
Yeah.
You hear about that fight.
Yeah.
Or maybe in the South, you hear about it because you
Yeah.
see the fight. But I feel like no one's seeing that in Wisconsin, and I was really shocked to see that number.
So I think Wisconsin is kind of seen as like this almost like forgotten like Midwestern state. We've been called like the Selma of the North, or like Mississippi, right? We've gotten that nickname several times. I don't think if people like actually realize what's going on in Wisconsin. I've talked to people on a national level and tell them like those statistics of like it's the worst place to raise a black child, is the most incarcerated. 53206 being in the heart of Milwaukee, where we're doing all of our work, is the most incarcerated. People don't know that. People think of, when they think of the Midwest and the issues of the Midwest, they think of Chicago and they think of, you know, maybe Detroit, right? They don't think of Milwaukee. They don't think of Wisconsin as a whole. I would go to other places and I tell people where I'm from and they're like, oh, there's black people in Wisconsin? And so I think we're kind of forgotten. And when you have the powers at be, whether it be photo ID, but you know, the powers that be at every level of government that are restricting the voice and silencing marginalized groups, specifically people of color, it allows for policies to further criminalize us, right? And then add on this layer of segregation. There's not a whole lot of black and brown unity, right? And being very deliberate of how are we talking about this issue of mass incarceration, and also realizing that what is happening to our Latinx brothers and sisters being detained through ICE, that is also a form of mass incarceration, right? And how are we working together and uplifting this issue of this just criminal system, right? Like, it's difficult for people to kind of wrap their minds around. And, you know, when you have literal bridges dividing people, it's kind of hard to engage that dialogue. So it's hard to say like how we got here. I think it's due to several policies. Scott Walker is kind of the common denominator, and that's why we have to make sure that we're making our voice heard at every step of the way, whether it be the ballot box or calling our legislator, right? Like, our level of involvement does not stop in November. It's going to continue no matter who's in office, and making sure that people are being held accountable.
So what's the organizing look like?
Yeah, so we come in, I have a group of 4 amazing organizers with all different experience levels, and our program director. I try to be there as much as I can, and we all check in together. We try to mentally check in with each other as like Black women who have inherited trauma. Trauma is passed down generationally. Having them navigate what they're seeing and what they're hearing on doors, and being able to uplift each other. And so we try to spend an hour, role playing, mentally checking in with each other. But, we spend a good 5-6 hours, and sometimes in these harsh Wisconsin weather, it's kind of hard to stay out on doors. But, they push, and they're so invested in really talking to people and being that vessel of taking what they're hearing on doors and really elevating that up to the people that are running for office that don't have that access to talk to candidates. And so we see ourselves as kind of like that vessel to be able to bridge that that conversation and really serve as ambassadors. So they're on doors for 5, 6, sometimes 7 hours a day. We've been taking advantage of the warm weather, so it's been a little bit longer.
53 degrees. And
it's a heat wave.
Negative 12 like 3 days ago.
Yeah. So, it's a heat wave for us, whatever that means in Wisconsin. But, we can knock on, on a really, really good day, we can knock on over 400 doors in a day, and really ask people, what does it look like to thrive? And we hear everything from, we need speed bumps to, I don't see my elected official very often. And making sure we're taking that information and collecting that, and reporting that back out, and making sure that we are making the proper connections to folks and letting people in power know, this is what we're hearing on doors. What are you doing about it? This is what I'm hearing. What are you doing to influence this in your campaign?
Have you received pushback?
Not a whole lot, actually. I think since we've launched, a lot of people have been incredibly excited. I think a lot of people are kind of waiting to see what we're going to do. Yeah. It's an incredibly crowded gubernatorial election. And so we're trying to figure out what our next move is. But at the end of the day, we're centered in making sure that we're centering Blackness. So a lot of people that are down with that are supportive of us. I think I'm in an incredibly fortunate position where I can wake up every morning and center Blackness in the state of Wisconsin, and be unapologetic and be bold and work with some really dope, radical Black women and be unapologetic about our message and say, look, this is what needs to happen, and really push that conversation. And if we do get pushback, we'll call it out as it is, right? Like, it's a little low-key racist. Let's talk about it.
I mean, even from the right, which is not so low-key, that's in your face every day. Yeah.
I've gotten a lot of new friends lately. A lot of random people that I wouldn't have expected. People that, in my previous life have been vocally against, have now requested meetings with me.
Wow.
And want to sit down and now follow me on Twitter.
Wow.
So it's really interesting to see the splash that we made, and I'm really proud of it. We're not just an organization that kind of popped up and people didn't know about it. We did a lot of prep work and a lot of one-on-ones and really engaging with the community, so the community felt that they were part of building this. So when we launched officially at the end of November, it kind of wasn't a surprise. It kind of wasn't a secret. So we have that base, and then we've just been able to continue to build momentum, and I've been really, really fortunate for that.
Do you see the organization expanding to other states?
That's a question I get asked all the time. People ask me all the time, are you going to expand into other areas in Wisconsin? I think long term, I would love that, to be able to continue this narrative and empower the Black community to really take back this political process that has typically shut them out, right? We've been shut out of this process all the time. How are we taking this process back? And if we can continue that narrative nationwide, that'd be phenomenal. So I think that's a little bit of my dream in the future. I would love to expand even into other cities in Wisconsin that have Black populations that have been neglected because there's only a small population. How are they coming together and building that community and solidarity? So it's a long-term goal. Really trying to figure out what it looks like. I think I got a call within the first week of launching, saying hey, can you help start a chapter in Racine? And I'm I'm not there yet. I would love to. I really would. And I think I'm really been thinking about probably every day of what that looks like to expand and really help amplify that voice.
Do you have partners with other organizations that have more, I mean, what I've seen is in the last year, organizations that may have fought over funding or assets in the past are now working with each other and strategizing and sharing resources. Have you found that BLOC is partnering up with other organizations to do the same thing?
Yeah, and so, you know, I mentioned like Black and Brown Solidarity, and so I've been working very closely with Christine Newman Ortiz from Voces de la Frontera, and they've done a lot of work in the last 10 years around the immigrant justice movement, and really being deliberate and being very intentional of, you're on the north side, or you're on the south side, and we're on the north side. How are we bridging this divide? How are we being very intentional? So really working with them, working with the Working Families Party has been a great opportunity. And then in my previous job, working with For Our Future, right? That has been able to really uplift and support the programming work of different partners. So working with For Our Future, working with the Center for Popular Democracy, it's really great to have like these two really big powerhouses and heavy hitters really support us and say, yes, this vision is amazing, let us find a way to support you. So I've been telling people all the time, I'm willing to sit down with anyone and work with anyone. I think I'm a huge fan of coalition building. I come out of student organizing where there's usually no resources. So you build coalitions in order to amplify each other's voice. And so I keep that with me. And how are we being strategic in this time where there can be limited resources? How are we working together, amplifying each other's voice, and really being intersectional with our work? And that's something I really appreciate with Voces, For Our Future, and the Center for Popular Democracy.
It's fascinating work. Where can we find more information for those who might want it?
So we're all on social media. So if you look at Black Leaders Organizing for Communities, we're on Facebook and Twitter, and we have our website at blockbyblock.org. And if people want to just like email us and questions or anything, info@blockbyblock.org.
Great. Angela Lang, thank you.
Thank you.
If you like this interview and you're at the end, so apparently you liked it a little bit, thank you for watching. We really appreciate it. You can watch them live as they happen if you're a member. Only members get that. Go to tytnetwork.com/join. And you get not only interviews live, you get the Young Turks live, you get Aggressive Progressive live, Old School, and all of it commercial free. Come join us right now, tytnetwork.com/join.